Love can bring out the best in people, shared dreams, support, and hope for the future. But even the happiest moments can hide unseen risks. In these 6 weddings, danger emerged where no one expected it, turning joyful celebrations into unforgettable tragedies. It was August 12th, 2017, at a community center in a mid-sized Iowa city. The single-story brick structure had sustained significant water damage during spring flooding when the nearby river crested its banks in April, sending muddy water through the lower level and saturating wooden support joists beneath the main floor. Ethan Caldwell, 28, an automotive technician, and Maya Patel, 26, an elementary school teacher, had reserved the venue for their wedding reception. They had saved for 2 years to afford their dream celebration. Municipal contractors had performed repairs following the flood damage, installing new subflooring over compromised sections and applying fresh varnish to conceal water stains. However, the underlying structural damage to the support beams remained unaddressed due to budget constraints and rushed timeline pressures. During venue setup the morning of the wedding, an experienced contractor noted visible sagging in the dance floor area and reported his concerns to the facility manager. The manager documented the observation but took no corrective action, dismissing it as normal settling. The wedding ceremony proceeded beautifully with 85 guests witnessing Ethan and Maya exchange vows. The reception began at 6 o'clock with dinner, followed by heartfelt toasts from family members. At 8:47 p.m., witnesses reported hearing a sharp crack echoing through the hall, the unmistakable sound of wood fracturing under excessive load. Ethan and Maya were dancing their second dance in the center of the floor, surrounded by other couples. The dancing continued for approximately 15 seconds after the initial warning sound, with most guests attributing the noise to the building's age. Then a second, more significant crack split the air, causing several people to look up with concern. Without warning, the center portion of the dance floor dropped away. Several guests later recalled feeling the floor dip once before giving way completely. Ethan and Maya disappeared into the opening as wood splintered around them and debris fell into the crawl space below. A few nearby guests also fell into the opening, landing on scattered debris. Most escaped with minor injuries and were able to climb or be helped out before emergency crews arrived. The collapse occurred so suddenly that neither had time to react. Witnesses who looked down into the opening saw Ethan lying on his back across a concrete beam. His breathing appeared shallow and uneven, and blood was visible around his mouth, suggesting severe chest trauma. Maya was pinned beneath a fallen wooden beam. Several guests noticed her legs bent sharply under the weight, and blood was visible beneath her head from a long cut across her scalp. Emergency medical services arrived 12 minutes after the initial 911 call, with paramedics immediately lowering ladders into the pit, while firefighters worked to clear debris. Ethan remained conscious when first responders reached him, but his breathing was labored and blood frothed from his mouth, indicating severe internal injuries. Paramedics noted that Ethan was struggling to breathe and showed signs consistent with major chest trauma. They inserted chest tubes based on the suspicion of collapsed lungs and began treating him for possible internal bleeding. Maya required more complex extraction due to the beam pinning her legs, but paramedics stabilized her condition at the scene. Ethan went into cardiac arrest during transport and could not be revived. Medical staff later confirmed that he had suffered extensive internal bleeding and severe lung injuries from the fall. Maya underwent emergency surgery for her head trauma and multiple fractures, but survived after weeks of intensive care. A later engineering report confirmed that flood damage from the spring had weakened several load-bearing joists beneath the hall. Inspectors noted that the repairs done after the flooding had covered visible damage, but did not restore the structural support. The facility was permanently closed following the incident. Maya eventually recovered physically, but moved to another state to start over. It was July 4th, 2016, in a residential area of Central California, where the temperature had climbed to 98 degrees Fahrenheit by noon and continued rising. Isabella Morales, 29, a dental hygienist, and Derek Thompson, 32, a plumbing contractor, had chosen to celebrate their patriotic-themed wedding in Derek's family backyard. Both had previously served in the military, and their wedding included patriotic-themed decorations chosen by their families. The large canvas tent dominated the backyard, rented from a local party supply company. The tent was an older model from the 1990s, commonly used for church events. The canvas showed visible wear, including multiple patches and significantly faded flame-retardant coating that had degraded over years of exposure. Derek's cousin had volunteered to handle the decorations, stringing old Christmas lights throughout the tent's ceiling in patriotic patterns. However, he lacked electrical experience and used multiple extension cords to power the lights, sound system, and catering equipment, a configuration that violated basic electrical safety protocols. 50 guests packed into the tent seeking relief from the brutal Central Valley sun. The ceremony had been held outside under the blazing heat, with everyone eager to retreat into the shade. The string lights had been running for hours in the heat, and several guests later recalled seeing the plastic housings becoming unusually warm. By evening, the reception was in full swing, with couples dancing to classic rock and country music. Isabella danced with her father near the center, while Derek chatted with his army buddies near the entrance. At 9:23 p.m., an electrical failure occurred in the overhead lighting circuit when a frayed wire finally sparked. The tiny flash was barely visible among the twinkling bulbs, but it was enough to ignite the aged canvas fabric. Witnesses later estimated the flames spread slowly at first, before accelerating as they moved across the fabric, creating a growing patch of orange flame. Then the fire reached a section of canvas treated with flame retardant that had chemically degraded over time, reducing its protective effect and allowing the flames to spread far more rapidly. The flames suddenly accelerated, spreading across a section of the ceiling within 30 seconds as burning material began dripping onto the guests below. Isabella and Derek were near the center of the tent when nearby guests first reacted to the flames overhead. As people rushed toward the openings and a bottleneck formed, the couple only noticed the fire when burning material began falling around them. Isabella's vintage-style wedding dress, with layers of synthetic tulle, caught fire from falling embers as they moved toward the exit. Witnesses saw Derek pull Isabella to the ground and roll her through the dirt in an attempt to smother the flames. A section of the burning tent structure then collapsed near them, temporarily trapping both under partially combusted fabric. Other guests who had escaped rushed back to help, pulling the couple from beneath the burning material. Derek sustained severe burns on his back and arms as he shielded Isabella from the flames. The local fire department arrived 8 minutes after the emergency call, by which time about a third of the tent had burned. Isabella had sustained burns covering 40% of her body surface area, while Derek suffered burns covering approximately 25% of his body. Isabella died 3 days later, from complications related to her burn injuries and subsequent infection. Despite aggressive treatment at the regional burn center, Derek survived, following multiple skin graft procedures and months of painful rehabilitation. Investigators recorded that the overhead decorations and string lights had been installed by a family member using multiple extension cords. While the setup was not intentional misconduct, it contributed to the unstable electrical load that ultimately failed. It was September 15, 2018, at a Veterans Hall in northeastern Ohio. Sophia Brennan, 27, a physical therapist who specialized in helping stroke patients, and Ryan Mitchell, 29, an accountant, had chosen the affordable venue for their modest celebration. Sophia had lived with a documented severe shellfish allergy since childhood, a condition that had sent her to the emergency room twice during college for anaphylactic reactions. She carried prescribed epinephrine auto-injectors everywhere and was extremely vigilant about food preparation, always informing caterers about her life-threatening condition. The couple had hired Sophia's Aunt Patricia to handle the catering as her wedding gift. Patricia ran a small home-based catering business, specializing in comfort food. During their initial consultation, Sophia had carefully explained her shellfish allergy, and Patricia assured her that all dishes would be prepared in a completely shellfish-free environment. Patricia prepared all dishes in a shellfish-free kitchen, as instructed, unaware that the Worcestershire sauce she used in the salad dressing contained anchovies, a fish ingredient that could trigger a severe reaction in someone with a fish allergy. The ingredient was not disclosed on the menu cards, and Patricia had no knowledge that fish proteins could cause the same life-threatening response as shellfish in certain individuals. The reception began at 6 o'clock with cocktails and appetizers, followed by dinner service at 7:30. Sophia mingled with guests, accepting congratulations and posing for photos, completely unaware of the hidden danger in what appeared to be an ordinary mixed green salad. At 7:45 p.m., approximately 20 minutes after consuming the contaminated salad, Sophia began experiencing the initial symptoms of anaphylaxis. The reaction progressed gradually at first, presenting as throat tightness and a scratchy sensation that witnesses later recalled she tried to steady herself against, appearing unsure whether it was anxiety or something more serious. Ryan was the first to notice his bride's distress as her face began to swell and her breathing became increasingly labored. Recognizing the signs of an allergic reaction, he immediately looked for Sophia's purse containing her life-saving EpiPen, but it was at the head table across the crowded reception hall. As Ryan fought through the crowd of guests to retrieve the medication, Sophia's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her throat continued to close as her body's immune response escalated, and her lips began turning blue from lack of oxygen. By the time Ryan returned with the EpiPen, Sophia had returned to her chair to steady herself, but collapsed beside it as her airway continued to close. He administered the epinephrine injection according to the instructions they had practiced, but her reaction had progressed too far for the medication to be fully effective. Emergency medical services arrived 11 minutes after the 911 call. Despite the EpiPen administration and additional epinephrine provided by paramedics, Sophia's airway was severely compromised by laryngeal edema. The paramedics attempted emergency intubation, but were unable to establish an adequate airway due to the extensive swelling. Sophia died from respiratory failure and subsequent cardiac arrest caused by anaphylactic shock due to fish protein exposure. Ryan remained physically uninjured, but was seen struggling to speak as responders confirmed Sophia's death during what should have been their joyous celebration. Investigators noted that the salad dressing had been prepared by a relative using Worcestershire sauce, which contains anchovies. The family member had followed the shellfish-free instructions, but was unaware that the fish ingredient posed a risk, as Sophia also had an undiagnosed fish allergy. The report concluded that the reaction resulted from an inadvertent ingredient oversight. It was June 18, 2016, at a converted historic mansion in coastal Georgia that had been transformed into an elegant event space. The 1890s structure, with its wraparound porches and ornate balconies, embodied the Old South charm that made it popular for romantic weddings. Chloe Harrison, 27, a bank teller who had grown up reading romance novels set in antebellum Georgia, and Austin Reed, 30, an insurance agent, had chosen the venue because it represented everything Chloe wanted in a wedding location. The mansion had a documented history of structural issues, some of which were not immediately visible to clients during routine walkthroughs. Termites had infested the building during the previous year, their colonies systematically eating through the wooden support beams that held up the decorative balconies. The damage was extensive but largely hidden from casual view, concealed behind fresh paint and decorative trim. A structural engineering inspection conducted 6 months earlier noted reduced load-bearing capacity in the balcony supports and advised that repairs be completed before the structure was used for group photographs. The recommended repairs had not yet been completed, due to the cost and scheduling challenges associated with historic restoration work. During the rehearsal the night before, the wedding party had gathered on the second-floor balcony for practice photographs. The photographer later recalled feeling the balcony shift slightly when the group stepped onto it and mentioned taking smaller groups, but the wedding party remained positioned for the planned photographs. The wedding ceremony proceeded beautifully in the garden below. With 120 guests seated in white chairs on the manicured lawn, Chloe and Austin exchanged vows beneath an arch of magnolia blossoms, as the golden hour light cast a romantic glow over the scene. Following the garden ceremony, Chloe and Austin climbed the narrow interior staircase to the second-floor balcony for their dream photographs. The balcony measured approximately 12 by 8 feet, with a total load capacity that had been significantly reduced by the hidden termite damage. They were joined by their wedding party for group photos, with everyone crowding together to fit in the frame. The photographer positioned them carefully, trying to capture the perfect shot with the garden and sunset visible in the background. At 7:34 p.m., during the third photograph, witnesses in the garden below reported hearing audible cracking sounds indicating structural failure in the support system. The photographer later reported hearing two sharp cracks from beneath the balcony. He paused briefly but resumed shooting when the group stayed in position for the next photograph. Witnesses in the garden below reported seeing the balcony drop away in a single motion. The structure separated from the wall and fell approximately 15 feet to the brick patio with all 9 occupants. The termite-damaged support beams snapped simultaneously, unable to bear the concentrated weight. Chloe sustained severe traumatic brain injury when she struck the decorative stone edge of a large planter, resulting in skull fracture and massive intracranial hemorrhage. Austin suffered spinal compression injuries from the impact that caused partial paralysis in his lower extremities. Emergency crews transported Chloe and Austin to area trauma centers. Chloe underwent immediate neurosurgery but died 6 hours later from traumatic brain injury. Austin survived with partial paralysis and entered long-term rehabilitation. Other wedding party members sustained fractures and contusions, but all survived. The mansion was closed, later condemned and demolished. Investigators confirmed severe termite-related structural failure, leading to safety citations and subsequent civil lawsuits from the victims' families. It was August 5th, 2017, at a lakeside pavilion in central Minnesota, where dark clouds gathered on the horizon as guests arrived for what should have been a perfect outdoor ceremony. Gabriel Santos, 31, a high school history teacher, and Lily Chen, 28, a veterinary technician, had chosen this location because Gabriel had proposed here 2 years earlier. The massive oak tree overlooking the lake was over 100 years old, its branches spreading wide enough to provide natural shade for a ceremony. Gabriel had knelt beneath this very tree when he asked Lily to marry him. National Weather Service had issued severe thunderstorm warnings for the region that morning, with conditions favorable for dangerous lightning and high winds. However, weather radar showed the main storm cell moving south of their location, with only scattered light rain in their immediate area and clear skies visible to the west. Several guests had suggested moving the ceremony indoors as a precaution, but Gabriel and Lily decided to proceed with a shortened ceremony after consulting local weather conditions. The storm appeared to be passing them by, and they chose to proceed beneath the tree, keeping the ceremony brief in case conditions changed. The couple and their officiant agreed to an abbreviated service that would allow them to move quickly to the pavilion if conditions changed. 40 guests waited in the covered pavilion 30 yards away, watching as Gabriel and Lily began their shortened vows under the ancient oak. The ceremony was proceeding smoothly, with clear skies visible in several directions, and the main storm cell appearing to have moved safely past their location. Gabriel and Lily were focused on each other, speaking the words they had written. At 4:23 p.m., an isolated lightning strike from a small, fast-moving trailing cell hit the oak tree without any warning. The strike came from a minor storm cell that had developed rapidly behind the main system, without triggering additional weather alerts. Gabriel was steadying himself against the tree trunk, his hand resting on the bark as he leaned in to kiss his bride at the conclusion of their vows. The electrical discharge occurred at the exact moment their lips met, sending a powerful secondary current through the tree and into Gabriel's hand and torso where he made contact. The massive electrical shock caused immediate cardiac arrest and severe burns at the contact points where Gabriel's hand and body touched the tree. The lightning strike created a pressure wave that knocked Lily backward, causing temporary hearing loss but sparing her from the direct electrical pathway. Lily watched in horror as her new husband collapsed motionless to the ground, his body showing the unmistakable signs of a lightning strike. The wedding guests in the pavilion were temporarily blinded and deafened by the brilliant flash and thunderclap. Emergency medical services arrived within 10 minutes of the strike, but Gabriel showed no vital signs when paramedics reached him. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts including CPR, defibrillation, and advanced cardiac life support protocols, he could not be revived. Gabriel was pronounced dead at the scene from cardiac arrest caused by electrical shock from the lightning strike. Lily survived with permanent hearing damage that was partially correctable with hearing aids, but she had witnessed her husband's death just moments after they were pronounced married. The oak tree exhibited a vertical lightning scar extending the full height of the trunk, confirming the strike path and electrical discharge pattern that investigators later documented. Weather analysis confirmed that the fatal strike came from an isolated cell that developed rapidly and was not predicted by forecasting models. It was January 14, 2016, at an isolated ranch house in south-central Montana, where temperatures hovered near 10 degrees Fahrenheit As the sun set behind the mountains after a day of light freezing rain, Amber Foster, 24, a kindergarten teacher, and Caleb Stone, 26, a ranch hand who had grown up in harsh Montana winters, had chosen this remote location for an intimate wedding with just 10 close family members. Amber had always dreamed of a winter wonderland wedding, complete with snow-covered landscapes and cozy fireplaces. The ranch house seemed perfect for their vision, offering rustic charm and isolation. The building was heated by a propane furnace that required electricity to operate the blower and electronic controls, with a wood-burning stove in the living room providing backup heat. Caleb, experienced in Montana winter survival, had prepared for potential power outages by stocking additional firewood, ensuring the backup generator was fueled and operational. Among the guests was Caleb's Aunt Dorothy, 74, who had raised him after his parents died when he was 12. Despite her frail health and diabetes-related circulation problems, she insisted on attending her beloved nephew's wedding. A band of freezing rain and wet snow moved through the area that evening, coating power lines with ice and triggering outages as temperatures continued falling. At 8 p.m., just as the ceremony was beginning, the electricity failed. Caleb immediately started the backup generator, but the fuel system began to fail as thickened fuel and ice buildup restricted flow, causing the generator to shut down after 30 minutes. The electronic ignition system prevented manual operation of the propane furnace without electrical power. Caleb's emergency radio was damaged when ice accumulation caused a tree branch to fall on the antenna. Road conditions became completely impassable due to ice accumulation, and cellular service was lost when the local tower's backup power system failed. Amber and Caleb proceeded with their candlelit ceremony in the living room near the wood stove, surrounded by their small group of family members. The candlelit ceremony created a calm atmosphere at first, even as the house began losing heat from its initial 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone remained gathered in the living room close to the stove, but even huddled together, the heat wasn't enough to offset the steadily falling indoor temperature. Within 4 hours of the power loss, the indoor temperature fell into the upper 40s, despite Caleb's efforts to maintain the fire. An Arctic front settled over the region overnight, dropping outdoor temperatures to around -5 degrees Fahrenheit by early morning and making additional heat recovery impossible. Although the presence of 10 people provided some passive heat, the prolonged outage and steadily dropping outdoor temperatures gradually overwhelmed the wood stove's ability to maintain safe indoor warmth. The group kept Dorothy closest to the wood stove and covered her in extra blankets, which helped her maintain body heat through the night. By 2 a.m., indoor temperatures had slipped into the mid-30s. Amber began showing early signs of hypothermia shortly after midnight as the house continued cooling, including shivering, fatigue, and slowed thinking. Her symptoms progressed through the early morning hours, developing into confusion, poor coordination, and difficulty following simple instructions. Caleb tried to keep her warm by stoking the fire and sharing body heat, but the steadily falling temperatures overwhelmed their ability to maintain her core warmth. Amber grew increasingly disoriented and eventually lost the ability to help herself stay warm. Her condition worsened over several hours. She collapsed around 7 a.m., and despite Caleb's efforts to revive her, she went into cardiac arrest. Search and rescue teams reached the ranch at 9:12 a.m. and continued resuscitation attempts, but she was pronounced dead shortly afterward. Core body temperature readings confirmed Amber died from severe hypothermia after prolonged exposure to steadily falling indoor temperatures. Investigators determined the power outage, generator failure, and the furnace's dependence on electricity left the group unable to maintain adequate heat despite the wood stove. Weather analysis later showed the freezing rain band was followed by a stronger than expected Arctic front, causing a rapid temperature drop that created conditions they could not overcome. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.